afternoon and welcome to the April edition of the Lit Gals. I am Martie Hoofer and I am so glad to be here today. I think it might be officially spring, which is very exciting. It also means we only have one more episode this season, so we'll talk about that later. But I am Martie Hoofer, and I am glad to be here today. I am the digital content manager for Keep Indiana Learning. And Anna, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, and happy spring. My name is Anna Cook, and I am a literacy professional consultant, and just so happy to be a part of this wonderful group. You might have noticed that Morgan is not with us this time, but we do have a very special guest, and her name is Erin McNeill. Erin, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin McNeill, and I'm a literacy specialist at Keep Indiana Learning as well. So just here to fill in for Morgan today, who had a scheduling conflict.
Yeah. So Erin, it'll be interesting to see at the end when we share what we're reading now, how different what you're reading might be different from what Morgan is reading. So that'll be a fun conversation. So I am excited about today's topic. We are 35 episodes into the Lit Gals, and we have never talked about short stories, which I find fascinating. And honestly, though, it kind of doesn't surprise me because I don't know about you, Anna and Erin, but I don't just pick up short stories and read them leisurely. Do either of you do that?
If one is recommended,
I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So Erin, if one is recommended, but you're not just picking them up, and Anna, you don't either. Yeah, I don't either. But so I'm excited to hear your thoughts about, because as a secondary teacher, Erin, you and I are both former secondary teachers. They played, I don't know about your classroom, but they played a vital role in my classroom. They just don't play a vital role in my personal reading life. So Erin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with short stories and how you use them, why you use them, and let's just see where the similarities and differences are.
Yeah, great. So first of all, I taught 11th grade for 20 years. So I ended up in 11th grade all of the time. I always had other grades as well, but I was always in 11th grade. And so when I was looking at all the American literature short stories, none of them have a happy ending. So I just want to start there and think that everything is sad and gothic and those kind of things that are in our textbooks. But if we look at the research of adolescents today, actually not just adolescents, everyone today, our attention span is about 9 seconds long. So when we are teaching novels, we are losing kids quickly, especially if we're spending 6 to 8 weeks reading the same thing. So short stories really helped keep my kids' attention and to look at closer text analysis and the skills that we should be teaching in literacy classrooms.
I love that. Anna, very different experience. I mean, from 11th grade, which Erin and I had never thought about how most short stories have unhappy endings. I'm going to circle back to that when I talk about my short stories. But Anna, how about in an elementary classroom? What kind of use of short stories do you have?
So we have all short stories, and they're short stories, and they're happy and everything like that. But so in elementary, it's all short stories. When they get into maybe 4th, 5th, 6th, that is when we do a chapter book or more of a longer read, if you will. But they're mainly short stories, and I can't wait to talk about the ones that I've picked out because I had a really incredible aha moment. So I'll wait and talk to you about that.
Okay, we'll come back to that. So as I taught 7th grade my entire teaching career, and I loved short stories because we could read them in one class period. They just fit so perfectly. Whether we read them aloud, we listened to them read, like on a video or something, they just fit well into the time period. And so we didn't have to worry about, oh no, you weren't here the first day when we read, the first half. Well, we did it all this period, which I always loved. So that's why I didn't go in as a 7th grade teacher loving short stories, but man, I walked away loving them because, much like Erin said, with a short attention span and it fits nicely in my little 47-minute period, they just worked. And so that's why I relied on them more and more as my career went on. So Anna, now I'm going to come back to you quick. What stories did you pick and what's your aha moment?
Well, it was just one of those timely things that happened that I thought, oh my goodness, this will be perfect for our, our session today, our Lit Gals time today that we have. So I was with a very dear family, friends of mine, mom and dad and 2 children, 2 elementary school age children. And the parents were talking about the new Snow White. Yeah. And one of their children said, Snow White, what are you talking about? And the father said, well, Snow White. And the child just kind of looked at him and went, oh, yeah, and it got me thinking about fairy tales. Yeah. So when I first started teaching, we taught fairy tales. I mean, the students knew all of the fairy tales. They were short stories, and there was always a wonderful life lesson. Mm-hmm. And it got me thinking about, even now when I am doing my consulting and I'm going into schools, K through 8, and I thought to myself, I'm not seeing a lot of fairy tales being taught. No. And I thought, what a incredibly missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. Because fairy tales are short. Yeah. And they have so many incredible teachable moments and life lessons. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple, if you don't mind. No. The first one being Cinderella. Mm-hmm. And with Cinderella, if you think about it, kindness, the life lesson of kindness and perseverance, and really remaining true to yourself. Yes. That's a huge life lesson, right? Yes. Just a huge one. And so I started thinking about, others. The Velveteen Rabbit, such a wonderful story, and a lot of us might be reading Velveteen Rabbit right now, and it has a wonderful life lesson, or life lessons, of being real. And being real is achieved by the love that we give, the connections that we have with other people, and that it's okay not to be perfect, right? We don't have to be perfect to be liked.
So Anna, just thinking about that, and just that one, what a life lesson that would be to share with like middle schoolers and high schoolers too, with social media. Oh my goodness, the lessons you could unpack.
Wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And once again, Martie, just like you said, it can be taught in a class period.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't have to take a couple of weeks on this. Another one that I had picked out was Peter Pan. And, Peter Pan growing up, being responsible, having an imagination and valuing people with an imagination, being brave, facing your fears, And so I just thought about, just these three and how incredibly important of life lessons that they can teach us, and it all be in a nice, concise, short story.
Yeah.
So any of the teachers that are here with us this time, if you could please just think about these fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how many of our young or elementary school students are hearing fairy tales.
Yeah.
I would be a little bit concerned because I don't think that there's a lot of them. So parents be thinking about that as well.
So Erin, I want to ask you, so thinking as you were preparing students for AP Lit and Lang test and that broad understanding they need of literature to write those really complicated essays, are we missing a component that we could start teaching back in elementary school with those fairy tales?
Maybe I'm a little hesitant to say yes, because, I think that maybe we're not teaching fairy tales because we're teaching science and social studies and those kind of short stories that are also really, really important. I remember teaching Greek mythology to English learners, and they were very confused of why are we studying Greece and where did this come from, when that's something that in the US we talk about from 6th grade on, right? There are short stories like that. So I would struggle to say that we're missing a piece. I think any knowledge, right, of reading is important, especially when you're doing those tests that have such broad questions.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I think also, because those fairy tales are a part of cultural knowledge. And when then you have to references you don't get because you're missing these components of cultural knowledge. My husband and I were watching a TV show last night, and there was a joke that I completely missed because I didn't know this one cultural reference. And I'm like, I don't get it. So we had to stop the show for him to explain to me the cultural reference in How I Met Your Mother. So, highbrow TV here that we were watching that I just didn't get it. So, because I just didn't know that piece. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Erin, what stories do you have and how did you use them in your high school classroom?
Yeah. So the stories that I thought about were just the ones that my students enjoyed. And I think the reason they enjoyed them over the span of the 20 years that I taught them was because they had something to do with current society, no matter when they were taught. So we were able to find something real in what was happening in current events based on all of the stories. So the first one is The Wretched and the Beautiful by Lily Yu. And it is about, it's actually so timely right now. It is about immigrants that come, they're actually aliens, and they land in a field, and they are not warmly welcomed. They have extra limbs and extra heads, and they don't look very pretty. And in fact, at one point, they are accused of eating cats and dogs. So the popular reference there is, and this was written in 2001, I believe, 2001. So then, so there's that. And then a few weeks later, after all this turmoil about these extra people and what are we going to do with them, new aliens land, and these aliens are beautiful. And they are accepted into society. So there are a lot of parallels there with teenage years, if you can imagine, of the way that teenagers feel about their bodies and their changing bodies and what's happening. So students really enjoyed that. And then there's lots of political ideas in there that students can argue as well.
Yeah.
And then The Masque of the Red Death is an Edgar Allan Poe story. Kids love Edgar Allan Poe, right? And it is the one where they are hiding from the plague. So the rich and nobles get together and they try to hide from the plague, and it turns out that they can't, right? That everybody has the same reaction, and they don't get to hide from the Red Death, who also comes to get them. So there were lots of parallels there about how, no one's better than anyone else. And again, teenagers really enjoyed making parallels to their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the third one is the ones who walk away from the Omelas. And that one is about a dystopian society, a utopia where everything's perfect. Everybody's happy. Everybody's perfect. They have cures for the common cold. They have floating lights. They have all kinds of things that anytime they would need them, they have those things. But in order to have those things, they have to sacrifice a child who like lives in a dark basement and doesn't get to see the light and all of those things. So it's that sacrifice of one for the greater good, and teenagers love to argue. So that really started a great, argumentative unit of kids being able to debate and talk about, do we want a perfect life if we have to hurt someone else? And how does that work in society? And where do we see that? Yeah.
Wow.
Fascinating. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Erin, go ahead, Anna.
All three of those books are incredible. So let me ask you this, Erin, how much time would you spend on each of those?
Well, it would depend. The Wretched and the Beautiful is only about 2 pages. So a period, maybe. But then students would get very interested in discussions and debates. So sometimes it would carry over. And the other 2, I would say 1 to 2 days. They're just a little bit longer, and thinking about the vocabulary is a little more involved. So, starting with that prior knowledge and building that word recognition would take up a good part of a period, and then to read it as well.
So thought-provoking, though. Like you said, you could definitely spend a second day just talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, or writing about them. Like after the talking, okay, now we've got a third day where we're writing, which I really like units like that are those, they're not very long. Like those, when you end up with like awkward 3 weird days between things, let's still do something meaningful. Let's not chunk these 3 days and like just waste them. Let's do something meaningful like this. I love that. And Erin, those are great stories for high schoolers.
Thank you. I just want to end with one more thing. I just want to reiterate the importance of discussion and why, right? In order to read a word or write a word, we have to hear a word. So anytime we're keeping those class discussions going, it's just such an important piece of any content area or literacy classroom. So just kind of a reminder of anytime we can get kids talking about what they read, it's a really good tool.
Absolutely. And actually all 3 of my stories that I'm going to share, what I wrote about each of them, all 3 lead to great discussions. And middle schoolers are just like high schoolers. They love to have opinions and ideas and talk about them. And all 3 of these stories, were ones that led to great discussions. And that's why I loved them so much. And I kept using them, is because the discussions were rich, and that's beautiful. So my first 2 are sad. So Erin, all 3 of yours were sad, right?
Yes, all of them.
Okay.
They all had some kind of sad ending. Yes.
Okay. 2 of mine are sad. And my last one isn't great, but it's not as sad. So I'll just preface it there. My first one, I didn't find till later in my career, so I didn't teach it many times, but was Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. I love the Indianapolis tie. So we did a whole Indianapolis virtual field trip about Kurt Vonnegut. I spent a whole day because I feel like that's like a cultural thing. They need to understand you lived in the same city as this great American writer. Let's talk about that. So, that story has such a twist at the end that kids do not see coming. And I'm not going to say any more about it than that, but their jaws would be hanging when we would get to the end. And I would sit back just waiting because I'm like, I know what's coming and you don't. Phenomenal short story that always left them, like I said, jaw just hanging. And if you can do that with 7th graders, that's a win. My second one is a Ray Bradbury short story called All Summer in a Day. And it takes place on like Venus or Jupiter or some other planet. I don't remember. But you only see the sun for like a few hours every year. And this little girl, the kids are at school when the sunshine was going to happen, and they lock a little girl in the closet. And so she doesn't get to see the sunshine. So that always led to such a good discussion about how do we take care of each other? And like, what's the importance of not just looking out for me, for looking out for the greater good, which Erin, some of your stories talked about as well. And Anna, yours too. So it's just how we find those stories that fit the right age. I couldn't have used the high school story, Erin, because the vocabulary would have been too hard. But, and Anna, you're not going to use All Summer in a Day because the vocabulary is too hard. It's a little too sad. It's, so you just got to find the right fit for the right class. And my last one is my favorite. And it's Langston Hughes, short story. And Langston is just one of my favorite writers. And thank you, ma'am, I taught it like very first week of school maybe, and then we would talk about it all year long because it's got such great characters that the kids liked that we could then come back and talk about them as we talked about other literacy skills that we wanted to unpack, whether it was theme or plot or conflict. So we spent lots of time with Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones. I'll never forget that character's name. So that one I don't feel like has a sad ending, but it does have some sad components, like stealing and the rough life of Mrs. Jones. And so it's got sad components, but I wouldn't call it sad. Like, I wouldn't do Harrison Bergeron the first week of school. I mean, my gosh, these kids would go home and say, what is that woman doing to us? I needed to build some trust with them. So, wow, what great short stories. And we are having no problem filling our time today talking about short stories.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So, thoughts about short stories before we go into our last segment of what we're reading now?
I just think that all of us were, very eclectic in what we chose and for the reasons that we chose, right? These short stories. And so you brought up some really good points, Martie, about when we would use these short stories, how, why. So thank you. Thank you both very much for pointing some things out. Thank you.
All right. Well, so Anna, we'll just throw it back to you first. What are you reading right now? Your topics have changed a bit of late, so I'm anxious to see what you're reading.
Because Anna's in that new book club of hers, right?
Yeah.
And so we are reading State of Wonder by Patchett. And this is a really good read. It's kind of suspenseful. It is about a pharmaceutical company that went to Brazil, and they sent a scientist there, and to learn more about fertility and why this area, has such a high fertility rate. And all of a sudden he dies, and they get an email or I forget what it was, but just saying he died and we buried him. So sorry. And so the pharmaceutical company is like saying, no, hold it. What's going on? So they asked another scientist to go there. And she's a little bit afraid, if you will, and concerned about what she might find when she gets there. So it's good. It's very good.
Oh, okay.
So yes, Martie, definitely different from what Anna usually is reading.
So, Erin, I know you said you've read that. Did you enjoy it as well?
I did enjoy it. Yes, I like Ann Patchett, though. I think most of her books are really good.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Erin, what are you reading now?
I have two. Can I have two?
Yeah, you can absolutely. Morgan always has two. Morgan always has what she's listening to and what she's reading. So you can absolutely have two.
I won't add what I'm listening to. I'll just add I'll add the other ones. So teaching foundational skills to adolescent readers. So I'm reading this, and really it's just great reminders about how important it is to talk about vocabulary and fluency and word work. And I think the biggest question I'm asked as a literacy specialist is how to fix comprehension. And that's how, right, is to look at those words and vocabulary and fluency practice. So I just love when you're reading a book that gives you practical tips, right, as well.
Oh,
so that's
good.
important. And then I'm also reading Broken Country. I don't have the cover on because I don't want it to get gross on the front. So it is, I am only 50 pages in, so I can't give you a whole 42. So I lied. It's about, the first page says the farmer is dead and everyone wants to know why. And there seems to be a love triangle. It was a Barnes and Noble book club pick as well as a Reese's book club pick. So that's why I have it. So we'll see. I can report later, but right now it seems to be pretty good.
Who's the author of that?
It is, great question, Clare Leslie Hall.
Okay. I'm intrigued by that first page. Yeah, I've never heard of this author either. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to take a page out of Morgan's playbook. I am listening to a book and reading a book, and I've decided I'm in my nonfiction era because they are both nonfiction, which is so not me. I read less than 10 nonfiction books a year, and I'm going to do 2 in 1 week. So I don't know what's going on. The one I'm listening to is called The Situation Room by George Stephanopoulos. I think I got his name right. He worked in the Clinton administration, and so he unpacks the history of the Situation Room in the White House. Starting back in the late 50s is when the Situation Room came to be. And he picks, the way he tells the story of the room is one defining moment from each president since then. Okay, so here's my takeaway. Martie now understands, at least a little bit, the Iran-Contra affair because I've listened to this book. I didn't understand that. I didn't know what was going on. I knew Oliver North is a name and John Poindexter. There's what I knew. I understand a little more now because in explaining the room and what goes on in the room, he also then explains the events, such as the Bay of Pigs or the troops leaving Afghanistan in Biden's term. So I've learned so much, and I'm going to have to check out the book, though, because it's got pictures in it, and I don't get to see the pictures on the audiobook. So I'm going to have to check it out. But so I'm listening to, and I'm almost done with The Situation Room. And the other book I'm reading for my book club, my online book club, is Challenger by Adam Higginbotham. And it's about, obviously, the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion. And you think, well, I know the end of that story. We're all of the age we lived this story. I have learned volumes from this book. So, Erin, though, I did think about you in a blog you wrote, I think, for Keep Indiana Learning. You shared about the importance of being transparent with our students as we're reading and like our own challenges as readers. Something I found myself doing in this book that I would love to share with kids is that as I got closer to the explosion, I read slower and slower and slower. Because I just didn't want it to happen. And if I didn't read it, maybe it wouldn't have happened. Even though, I was in 6th grade math class. I know exactly where I was. I know this happened. But I'm learning volumes and wow. Yeah. So Martie in her nonfiction era, lots of U.S. history is what's happening right now.
Good.
All right. Well, we forgot to clue Erin into our tagline as we leave. Anna, sorry about that, Erin. I didn't think about it. So I'll take Morgan's role here. So Erin, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. All right. Well, be well. Do good work.
And keep in touch. We'll see you next month.